Hey everybody, welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I'm Harry. Before we go any further, please make sure to hit the subscribe button somewhere on the lower right hand corner of your screen. But today we have another top 10 list for you. Today we're going to be talking about my top 10 games from Fantasy Flight, the very renowned, popular publisher. Last week I did a top 10 publishers list, and I'm following that up with one of those publishers that was on my top 10 list. No spoiler as to where, and that's Fantasy Flight. Now, just to talk a little bit about Fantasy Flight is known primarily for its Ameritrash or thematic style games. If you've watched this channel, you would know that I identify probably a little bit more as a Euro gamer, in particular midweight Euro games. And although Fantasy Flight has experimented and flirted with Euro style games, it's not necessarily their forte or their bread and butter. It's not necessarily the best games they've published, and those Euro games that they've published are not necessarily the most popular and renowned within the industry. At the end of the day, that is what they're known for their Ameritrash thematic style games. Now, I do like me some Ameritrash. However, there are some limits to these games. First of all, the rules tend to be a little bit clunky and very complex, and makes it hard to teach to other people. The game length, usually is a factor, which means these games do not get played as often throughout the year as some of my Euro style games get played. They very seldom get played during weekdays. They're usually played on a weeknight, a weekend, or maybe some time that I've set apart. Also, most of these games, for the most part, are games that I never play with my wife Lily, because my wife Lily is clearly even more defined than I as a Euro gamer. So most of these games would be games that would not appeal to her to begin with. All that just to say, these are 10 games that I really, really appreciate. Although, for different factors, again, the overall, style of these games don't end up getting as much focus and attention in my household. Now, there are some games that are not going to be on this list that people are going to notice. Lots of games, actually. Most of the Lovecraft mythos games or the Cthulhu mythos games will not find themselves on this list because I haven't played any of them. There's a few that I'm hoping to play sometime in the near future: Eldritch Horror and Elder Sign. And these are games that I think, from what I've heard from their thematic integration and cooperative play, that I think I may enjoy if I find the right group of people to play with. Also, the fact that these games play solo increase the chances that they might get to the table and still might be enjoyed. But I have not played those games as of yet, so don't hold your breath. They will not be on the list. Without any further ado, we'll move on to what actually is on the list. First of all, with my number 10, and that is Scarab and Minotaur Lords. And do not change the channel. I know you probably haven't heard of these games. These games are out of print, but perhaps you've heard of Blue Moon, which is, I guess, Reiner Knizia's answer to Magic the Gathering, two-player tactical card game, back and forth, with a fantasy theme, right? Obviously, with Reiner Knizia and his style design, these games tend to be more mathematical and more methodical, perhaps, than your average Magic the Gathering type of game. Now, these are his early ventures down that path. These were actually published before Blue Moon, and these two are can be integrated. They're compatible with one another. One is Egyptian theme, one is Greco theme or Greek theme, and basically, again, it's that two-player combat, except there's area control here, right? So players' cards are going up against one another. My cards are going to get up against my opponent's cards, but they're vying for control in different areas. There's 6 different regions divided into 2 halves, and you're trying to get control at the beginning of your turn of 2 regions in one half and 2 regions on the other half of the board. He's borrowed from my older games like Battle Line or Schadenkarten, the idea of specific areas where they're separated from everything else, and players are going to toe-to-toe in that area, and they're going toe-to-toe in another area. And again, you're comparing lots of cards that have numbers on them, But these cards also have special text with special abilities that are somewhat thematic, related to the Egyptian and ancient Greek theme. Really, really cool, really neat for that area majority feel, but also for that tactical 2-card play. He adds different phases in the game where each card specifies what phase it could be played in. And also the different areas, the different regions on the board are divided into like 3 different categories. You got like military, economy, and science, or something along those lines. And the cards actually specify which areas they can be placed in, which regions. Because not only can some cards not get played on certain phases of the game, certain cards cannot get played on certain regions of the game. So you have those delimitations, and you must work within those confines, within those boundaries that the game creates to make the best decisions, the best tactical decisions. Really neat game. I have fun playing it. Now we move on to my number 9 Fantasy Flight game of all time, and that is Star Wars the card game. And this is designed by Eric Lang. It is one of the earlier living card games the Fantasy Flight produced, which is their answer to the CCG, the collectible card game, where you have content that you can buy and you know just exactly what you're going to get, but they're going to keep on, spitting out all of these expansions, tons of expansions for this game. I'm not sure if they're still in print, though. Every time I check, it seems like they're out of print. But this is a Star Wars themed game. Again, kind of like in response to the Magic the Gathering style of games, where 2 players take, each player takes an opposite side. In this case, there's asymmetrical sides because one player gets the Force and the other player gets the light. The light, and the other player gets the dark side, the light side and the dark side of the Force. And it's really, really cool. The first couple times I played it, I wasn't liking it too much because we played with the factions of the Rebellion Army and the Imperial Navy. And first of all, I didn't like the cards too much, and I also thematically had a very hard time getting involved into it, because that's really not what I watch Star Wars for, to see the Imperial Navy and the Rebellion Army or whatever get into it. But when I started playing with the Jedi versus the Sith, that I found to be cool. Not only thematically was it more immersive because you're familiar with these characters like Luke Skywalker and Yoda, and you're familiar with Darth Vader, of course. Like, not only does that make you enjoy the game more, but also the powers in the cards were neater because of the thematic reasoning behind it. The fact that the Jedi and the Sith are so much more powerful than your regular army and navy men. It lends to the fact that these cards are going to be able to do neat and cool things that you couldn't do with the other factions. So when I started playing with that, it was a much more enjoyable experience. Now, real caveat here, I've never wanted this game. That probably doesn't help it too much, but it's fun if you like Star Wars, if you like, CCGs or LCGs, living card games. Cool game. My number 9 Fantasy Flight game of all time, Star Wars the card game. Now we move on to my number 8, and here is a Euro, and this is Tigris and Euphrates, again designed by Reiner Knizia. Reiner Knizia is probably the Euro designer who's designed most games for Fantasy Flight. They've actually picked up lots of his games, and Tigris Euphrates is one of the latest. It's an old classic game, but Fantasy Flight put it back into print. I'm not sure if they were the first publisher, but they're definitely one of the more recent publishers. And Tigris Euphrates is a game that can be played 2 to 4 players, and basically you're placing down tiles and you're creating different regions, different areas, but you're also placing down leaders that correspond to different spheres of civilization, and they match in color, right? So all your player pieces are not going to match in color, they're going to match in shape. And then the other player is going to have their own player pieces, and they all have in shape, because each of your player pieces comes in a different color, and that color corresponds with one of these spheres of civilization. You got your rulers, which are black, and your priests, which are red, and your merchants, which are green, and your farmers, which are blue. And every time you place down tiles of those corresponding colors, if you have the matching leader in that region, you're going to score these points. And there's a couple other things you could do to exponentially score points, like you could create monuments, which will help you, rack in lots of points as the game goes on. You can attack your opponents, and you will attack your opponents and engage in conflict, which again could add you lots of different points if you defeat them in certain categories. But what's interesting is the ingenious mechanism, as some people call it, was kind of innovated here, where Reiner Knizia decided that your final score, you're trying to score points in each of these 4 different colors, your final score is going to be the color in which you score the least. So it forces you to try to be balanced, to not neglect any one color in particular, because you can just rack up all the points in one color, but if you're falling way behind in another color, then all those points are really irrelevant. You want to balance it out, make your decisions, factoring in what you could do to help each of these colors. You want to pay attention to anything that's potentially being neglected and address it as soon as possible before it gets out of hand. And that's another thing. This game can get out of hand. There is, in my opinion, at least in a 2-player game, a little bit of a runaway leader problem. If you're playing 3 or 4 players, I'm sure that balances itself out, because the players really actually balance it out, because someone will be there to slow whoever is, or several someones will be there to slow whoever is running away with the lead down. But in a 1-on-1 player game, if someone gets to too much of a momentum, it's going to be kind of hard. Now, however, because of the scoring mechanism, the final score doesn't look as bad, right? Usually your 2 lowest scores in a 1-on-1 player game are still going to be kind of close to each other, but the experience in the game can feel pretty frustrating, pretty miserable, because you feel like you're getting destroyed or annihilated, and you feel like you have no chance, even though the final score might not look like a blowout. But again, just that feeling itself, is indicative of the fact that this has a little bit of a runaway leader problem. But it's a really cool game, really fun, classic game, over 20 years old. My number 8 fantasy flight game of all time, Tigris and Euphrates. Now we move on to my number 7, and it is Deadwood, Wild West themed game. I would say this is mostly Euro mechanically. It's a worker placement game where players are managing their different resources, and in particular their resources include their ammunition and their horses that help them escape from battle. There is conflict in this game. It includes their money, which is ultimately how they can do some things during the game, but it's also how they win the game at the end. Whoever has the most money wins. Now, as the game goes on, you are expanding and building the city of Deadwood, and more buildings are being added to the city. And with every building, that's an additional place that a player can go to act and trigger those buildings and whatever effects that building gives it. Now, it's interesting because each player has their own ranch of different workers, and I think each player has 9 different workers. But you have to kind of tap into the pool, because only 3 of them are immediately available at your ranch to begin the game. And you have to trigger some buildings that bring some of them in, some from the pool into your ranch, so you can actually activate them and use them. Now, there's 3 different types of workers for players. So with different values, right? You have 3 number 1 valued workers, 3 number 2 value workers, and 3 number 3 value workers. And the higher ranked workers are better in the sense that they're more secure, they're more safe, because when you go to a building, a player in the future can go and grab and place their worker on a place where you're at and trigger a duel. And a duel will earn that player a wanted poster, which is bad. It's going to be negative points if they don't get rid of those, but they can get rid of them by going to church and going to some other buildings there that help them get rid of the wanted posters. But it's worth it, because they might want to trigger that building's ability where you're at. And not only that, if they kill you, your worker, goes to the burial plot and they're gone. I think it's called Foothill or something like that. They go to the burial plot, they're in the mountains, and they're gone. They're never coming back. That's 1 less worker that you have to deal with for the rest of the game. So there's a couple benefits, not only the building benefit, but also the benefit of getting you down to 1 less worker, or getting one of their opponents down to 1 less worker. So you want to have stronger workers in these buildings, because that means that when you get engaged in a duel, you'll be able to roll more dice and increase your chances of winning that duel. Now, it is possible, it's luck, you're rolling dice, that the person with the weaker worker could still win that duel, but you want to strategically place your workers, factoring all these things in. And it's cool because in this game, there's 3 different end game triggers. You have the wanted posters, which I mentioned, that players will accrue every time they initiate a duel. The initiator gets that wanted poster. And when those wanted posters run out, the game is over. You also have the train. Whenever the train station is built, the game is also over. And there's a third way of ending this game, which escapes my mind right now. But it's really neat to have these 3 different endgame triggers, because it means you kind of have to be on your toes, because any of these 3 things can kind of happen. So you kind of have to keep track of each of these different potential endgame triggers and calculate and make your decisions accordingly, factoring the fact that the game might be coming to a close if certain players take certain actions, right? And map these things out. And also, if you're feeling confident about your lead, you might want to trigger the end of the game by, you know, committing said actions that will trigger one of these endgame triggers. Anyways, really, really cool game. Nice Wild West feel. Nice thematic feel, city building feel. I like the city building theme in a game. Nice, some simple, nice worker placement with a little bit of, you know, take that or you know, conflict. But good game. I need to play this game more. I only played it 2 times. Maybe if I play it more, it has a chance of climbing up the rankings. But for now it has a pretty decent spot at my number 7, Deadwood. Now we move on to my number 6, and this game, between this and number 5, it was actually really, really close. The gulf between, you know, 4 and 5 and 6 is a little bit bigger, and then from 3 to 4 and so on and so forth. But this one was very, very close, but I had to give the edge to my number 5. My number 6 is going to be the Lord of the Rings living card game, which is, again, one of the earlier, this is designed by Nate French, one of the earlier living card games within the Fantasy Flight line. Lord of the Rings theme, which I really, really enjoy. I like the theme. I find it to be immersive. This is a cooperative game or a solo game. I've only played it solo. I probably only will play it solo. I really, really enjoyed solo. I don't think I would even want to ruin the experience by including another player, because there's something so methodically pleasing about this game. Just sitting down and puzzling and calculating and figuring out what decisions you're going to make, and not have to factor in, you know, brainstorming with someone else, even though there's some benefits. Obviously, you know, someone sees things from a different perspective and sheds some insight on something that you didn't consider. That could be very helpful in a cooperative game. However, the puzzly nature of this game, I just get such a enriching experience every time I sit down and try to crack this puzzle on my own. However, I will say this, I am pretty bad at this game, I will say. I mean, I don't quite often go out on record and say that I'm really bad at a game, but I'm going to go on record and say I'm bad at this game. I think I am, at least. You know, there's one faction in this game, in the base game. I really only own the base game. I have a couple other small packs that I haven't opened, but in the base game, there's one faction. It's the faction that has Legolas, Gimli, and what's the other guy? Thalin, I think. These 3 guys are the main heroes. I cannot win with that faction for my life. You know, there's sometimes that I come closer than others, but I cannot win with that faction at all. And that tells me that I'm bad, right? So, and I play on easy mode and all that stuff, and I just cannot win with that faction. Beats me. But I love trying, you know. As a matter of fact, that's probably the faction I've played the most with, because of the fact that I cannot win with them. But it's really cool. I don't get tired of it. I've played it a good amount of times, just the base game, and I still haven't gotten tired of it. And there's so much content out there. There's so much expansions, and I don't even know if they're done with it. And I feel like I could just buy a handful of expansions, and I would probably have enough to take me forever with this game. So this is my number 6. Again, if I was a little bit better at it, maybe it would climb up to my number 5. I'm not too sure. Maybe with more play, this one would come up, and the number 5 might come down with more play as well. But for now, it's got a pretty decent spot as my number 6, Lord of the Rings, the card game. And now we move on to the cream of the crop, my top 5 games from Fantasy Flight. This is number 5, just barely edged Lord of the Rings for this spot. And this is a game that I haven't played too many times either. And if I play more, might climb up, might climb down. Time will tell. And that is Mission Red Planet by Bruno Cathala and Bruno Fedudi. This is a science-themed, I think steampunked, more like it, more appropriately termed, area majority game where players are vying for control on the red planet or Mars. They're sending their astronauts to these areas to try to get majorities in these areas, and by getting majorities, tapping into the resources that the different areas, the different surface areas on Mars and on its orbiting moon Phobos are producing. Now, what's interesting about this game is that it incorporates the secret character selection from Citadel's Bruno Feduti's design. Bruno Feduti is the co-designer here. But it's different here because each player has their own deck of the same exact character cards that the other players have. So it's not like Citadel's where only one player will be the assassin and nobody else will be. No, each player can theoretically choose the same exact character on the same turn. However, every time you place a character, that character has become exhausted and cannot come back into the game. He or she cannot come back into the game unless you play a specific character that makes you get all the previously played characters back into your hand. So at most, a character is going to get played twice in your game, and very few characters will actually get played twice in the game because there's only 10 rounds and you have 9 character cards. So most of your characters are only going to get played once. So it's a matter of choosing the right round and the right situation, the right circumstance in which to play that card. Another thing is, just like in Citadel's, these cards determine the turn order. There is no tried and true turn order in this game. Instead, whenever you place your character, you place it face down, and the active player, so to speak, goes through a countdown from 9 to 1. And as they go through the number, the players who played the characters that correspond with those numbers reveal those cards and take their actions. So sometimes you want to pick a card because of its particular action that it's going to give you in that round. But other times you might take a lesser action because it will give you a higher number in the turn order and increase your chances of going sooner rather than later, as opposed to having a great action that you might be risking because the board situation or the game situation might not be the same after your opponents have taken their turn, right? Because this game has a lot of viciousness, a lot of take that. There are cards that hurt your opponents, that kill their astronauts, that destroy their spaceships and totally mess up their turn. And you have no guarantee that by the time you take your turn later on in the round, that the same situation that you saw when you first chose that character card is still available to you. Things could change drastically, which is a little bit mean-spirited, but at the same time, I think it works in this game. Also, this game has a really neat feature in the sense that there's secret missions. First of all, you have a public mission that everybody knows about and everybody's going to be trying to accomplish, but each player has at least one secret mission to start the game and can accrue more secret missions as the game progresses, and nobody knows what's happening. And the secret missions are very different from one another, so players might try to puzzle and figure out what your particular mission is, but they might not be able to because, again, there's so many other ones that it might be. And at the end of the game, each player reveals their secret mission and score bonus points. So while you're scoring points throughout the game, there's 3 scoring rounds, and players have an idea of who may or may not be winning based on the visible score that's out there or the things that they see. There's the information that's, hidden, the things that they do not know, which is those secret cards. And once they're revealed, boom, all of a sudden, the script has been flipped and somebody else is in the lead, somebody else is winning. So really, really cool game with lots of neat features. Area control, area majority, which people who are subscribers or longtime viewers of the channel know that I have a great appreciation and estimation for games that include some sort of area majority, area control, and this game does a really, really good job at it. Bruno Cathala, one of my favorite designers. Fantasy Flight, really good production. My number 5 Fantasy Flight game, Mission Red Planet. Now we move on to my number 4, and that is Battlelore. And this is the fantasy iteration or implementation of the Command & Color system. Originally designed by Richard Borg, but this has kind of been revamped and re-implemented by Lucas Litzinger. Is that true? Is it Lucas Litzinger? Do we have a name here? I want to give credit to the right person. I will figure that out and I will include that information somewhere. Second edition design and development by Robert A. Kuba. I am so sorry, Robert. You're the man. You did it, not Lucas. So yeah, Robert did this, Robert A. Kuba, and basically they took the core system of Battlelore, didn't change too much to it, but added some different fantasy themed units, right? Different creatures and species, races that do different things and have different abilities and different powers based on them. And what's interesting is it has a really cool setup phase before the game starts, each player basically sets up their half of the board. Unlike the other Command and Colors games, which are scenario based, which the rules tell you specifically what terrain types and features are on the board, where they go, what units are on the board, where they go, and so on and so forth. Here, no, you decide. You have a few cards to choose from, which have preset scenarios or setups, but you choose which one you have. And each setup not only has a different configuration of what the terrains and the map look like, but they also have certain different abilities that are triggered. And then after that, players choose the units they want to use. And there's a bunch of units you could choose from, but each unit has a point value. And you have an allotted amount of points that you can use to spend for the units that you actually start the game with. So you have to factor that in. So you might want a lot of a very cheap unit, or you might, sacrifice numbers for quality and get a few of some really powerful, strong units. So all those decisions are made in your hands. And as players reveal their startup scenario, the startup situation that they created, that's when people are understanding, oh, okay, so you have this unit on that part of the board. Okay, if I would have known that, I may have put that unit on that side of the board. And then, boom, players just go from there and go back and forth. You have the lore, which adds a few special abilities. It adds another way of turning what could be considered a dud roll in your dice into an opportunity, because you collect lore tokens, and in the future these lore tokens are like currency to buy a different type of card than your typical Command and Color cards that you're used to playing in CNC style games. Now, I will say this, I like it. It's a great alternative. I still prefer, me as a historian, I still prefer the historically based CNC or Command and Color games, but I cannot argue against anybody who would say that this is better than them, because there is some, really interesting nuances in this game, some interesting wrinkles that work and work well. And of course, you have the Terranov theme, which has been very successful for Fantasy Flight. And again, it gives you that immersiveness as opposed to maybe a historical event that you may not resonate with. So I cannot argue with people who say that this is the best iteration of Command and Colors. It's just not in particular my favorite, but it is my fourth favorite Fantasy Flight game of all time. And now we move on to my number 3. And my number 3 and my number 2 were really, really close. But I had to give the edge to my number 2 because my number 3 is a little bit clunkier in my opinion. It's a little bit longer in my opinion. Requires, for me at least, more people to play with. And it's just a bigger investment of time and emotional and headspace. So I had to give the edge to my number 2. My number 3 is Descent: Journeys in the Dark 2nd Edition. Love this game. I love playing it, especially with my nephews and niece. We've had some great plays of this. We're in the middle of a campaign. I think we're like on quest 6 of a campaign. And I'm doing really good. I'm the overlord actually, and they're the heroes. So this game can be played solo with an app. There actually are some expansions that let you play it solo analog. You have to download the rules or some PDF of the rules on Fantasy Flight, but you can buy the materials and the cards on Amazon. And I'm looking into that because I'm old school, and I just feel like with an app I would lose some of it. But even so, I don't know how much I want to play it solo either way, because I enjoy playing it with other human players. And I get it, you could play with the app and play with human players. That's something I might explore in the future, but I'm not so sure if I want to play with the app and by myself. That I do not know. But for now, we've had some fun playing it. It's been a while since we played it because now, due to this crisis, I'm home, they're home, we don't get to see each other. And even though I have a great list of games that I like to play remotely, this is not one of them. Great, again, this is the Terranov universe, same universe as Battlelore, has some amazing heroes. This is a role-playing game. This is basically an RPG in board game format. Players are each controlling a different hero. They form together as a team, a band of heroes, trying to defeat all the evil monsters and ultimately the overlord in these different quests, searching for treasure, buying items and weapons and leveling up and all these things. And each player has their own special abilities, their own weapons, their own cards and different things that they could acquire as they level up. But the Overlord also gets to level up, and as the two sides level up, you know, they're supposedly, ideally, supposed to match up evenly. Even though I do feel like the Overlord has a little bit of an edge, but really, really cool, fun game for that role-playing RPG, you know, fantasy D&D type of experience. My number 3 Fantasy Flight game of all time, Descent Journeys in the Dark 2nd edition. My number 2, the one that just beat this out, is Runebound, which is also from the Terranoff very popular universe. And the 1st edition was actually the forefather, the originator of this Terranoff universe. This is the 3rd edition. This is indeed designed by my guy, Lucas Litzinger. The original was designed by Martin Wallace. I haven't played it, even though I've heard really good things about the 2nd edition in particular of his design. I'm actually curious into getting that one. But we'll talk more about that later, because right now we're talking about 3rd edition. I really like this game. I play it solo sometimes. And I also play it with some of my friends. 2 players. This game would be too long with 3 players. It's already pretty long with 2 players. With 2 players, we're talking about potentially 2.5 hours. With 3 and 4 players, I don't even want to imagine. At 1 player, it takes a little bit over an hour. So it's really, really fun at that level. I love the story. I love all the cards. I love the different ways you could level up by getting all these equipments and acquiring all these different skills, with the goal of ultimately, you know, winning, defeating the mastermind at the end of 2 acts. I actually won this game for the first time not too long ago, maybe a month before this whole COVID thing went down. I had finally won my first game of this game, because I had not been very successful with this game either. But that does not change the fact that I've always enjoyed this game. Again, thematically, I find it to be immersive. The game board is beautiful. The components are nice. It has a decent amount of content. It's not the greatest. I think 2nd edition had way more expansions, but there are some expansions. I'd say there's like, you know, 5 expansions for this game that add a little bit to it. So my number 2 Fantasy Flight game of all time is Runebound. Now, what's my number 1? What can possibly be better than all these games? Well, it's a game that A, is much older than all these games, and B, was not originally published by Fantasy Flight, but Fantasy Flight has put out its standard version, and it has withstood over a decade of trials and tribulations to still remain the only company that publishes this game. My number 1 Fantasy Flight game of all time is Cosmic Encounter. This game is amazing. And again, it's tough because it's a group game. You need at least 3 players to play. I would never play this with anything less than 4, though. And on top of it all, I think it doesn't really feel epic or great until you're playing 5 or 6. I will play 4 and enjoy it immensely. I will not even come close to it at 3, just because I feel like it robs it too much. This is a great negotiation, space, science fiction themed game where each player is a particular, you know, ruler of an alien race, and that race gives them special powers and abilities that allows them to break and bend the rules that the game creates, the restrictions that the game rules create. That player can bend or tweak one of those rules in a way that none of the other players can, right? And each player has their own special ability, and all of these abilities are so great. I mean, as you play the game, yeah, your perspective, you know, zeroes in on particular races and figures that, you know, one race is more advantageous than the other, but at the end of the day, they're all very, very helpful in their own particular ways and within their own particular scenarios. Now, the coolest thing about this game is, yeah, you're engaging in combat and intergalactic conflict, trying to take over different, you know, different planets and colonizing them in other players' planet systems. But there's also lots of, you know, negotiation and politics going on in this game, because sometimes, if you can, you're trying to work together with someone and say, hey, let's not fight against each other. Let's just exchange, you know, a presence. Let me have a presence in your galaxy, and I'll let you have a presence in my galaxy. We each get a point. The first player to establish 5 foreign colonies is the winner. But the coolest thing is, in this game, you can have more than one winner. Theoretically, all you need is to have one loser, because all the players can reach 5 points at the same time, because as you engage in what they call an encounter and it becomes a conflict, let's say, you get to invite allies to join you into that battle, and the defender also gets to invite allies, and one by one each player decides which side they want to join. And there's benefits for helping the defender and there's benefits for helping the attacker, and you got to realize what's best for you in that current situation. But then if you succeed, all players advance their score token 1 point for establishing a colony in that planet. So again, players could all advance to 5 at the same time. Really, really cool, fun, some amazing, exciting, wow, OMG, laugh out loud moments, lots of betrayal, lots of cooperation. It's just neat to see which sides of the table end up working with each other. You never know who's going to be until the game starts to unfold. And it's just so exciting to just explore a new alien. There's so much content in this game. I haven't even tapped in the base game. I have tons of expansions, but I haven't tapped all the material in the base game. There's so much there. I have not played with every alien, and it's hard to play with every alien, but a part of you kind of wants to, because you want to see what it's like. Like, oh, this player's played with that alien. Let me see what I could do with this guy. Really neat game. Again, tons of expansions, 6 out there. If you're looking for games with high replayability, this is definitely one of them. My #1 fantasy flight game of all time, Cosmic Encounter. And that is my top 10, or those are my top 10 fantasy flight games of all time. I enjoy this company. Again, it ranked in my top 10 publishers of all time. Check out the video to see exactly where. There are some limits because of, again, the people I play with, my own personal preferences, and leaning towards Euro or midweight Euro style games also holds this company back perhaps from being even more loved by me. But right now I just mentioned 10 games that I can play whenever, especially those top 5. Oh man, I really, really love those games. So how about you comment down below and tell me what your favorite fantasy flight games of all time are. Do you have 10? Do you have just 5? Maybe that's the only company you play from, or maybe you've never played a fantasy flight game. I'm interested in hearing your opinion, interested in hearing where you disagree with my rankings, what games I've omitted, what games you think I should try out from Fantasy Flight's catalog, and what games you think I would enjoy. Well, thank you so much for joining us here at When Harry Met Board Games. Again, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down somewhere over here. Like this video and show us some love. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.